On the afternoon of May 19, 1977, 20-year-old Colleen Stan stood on the side of a highway in Eugene, Oregon. It was the week of her friend's birthday, and she was trying to hitchhike her way down to Northern California to attend the party. Colleen was a free spirit, typical of the late 1970s, but she was also cautious. She had already turned down several rides from drivers who made her feel uneasy. Then, a blue Dodge van pulled over. Inside was a seemingly picture-perfect, wholesome young family. A clean-cut man named Cameron Hooker, his wife Janice, and their innocent newborn baby. Looking at the mother and the infant, Colleen's instincts told her she was completely safe. She smiled, thanked them, and climbed into the passenger seat, completely unaware that she had just stepped into a carefully laid trap. For the first few hours, the conversation was completely normal and friendly. But as the van crossed the California state line and neared a lonely, isolated stretch of road near Red Bluff, the atmosphere inside the vehicle shifted instantly. Cameron suddenly pulled the van off the highway and onto a deserted dirt track. Before Colleen could even process what was happening, Cameron turned around with a hunting knife, threatening her life, while his wife Janice watched in total silence. Cameron forced a heavy, custom-made wooden box over Colleen's head, a device designed to completely block out all light, sound, and fresh air. Plunged into terrifying, suffocating darkness, Colleen was pushed into the back of the van. The wholesome family profile evaporated, replaced by a calculating predator who was driving her toward a dynamic of captivity that would defy human belief. Cameron Hooker drove Colleen to his modest suburban home in Red Bluff, California. To the neighbors, Cameron was a skilled, quiet woodworker who spent long hours in his basement workshop. But the terrifying truth of what he was constructing down there remained hidden from the world. Colleen was taken into the basement and forced into a custom-built wooden box hidden directly underneath the couple's waterbed. The dimensions were horrifying. It was just 6 feet long, 3 feet wide, and less than 1 foot high. It was shaped exactly like a coffin. For the next 7 years, this box became Colleen's entire world. She was kept locked inside it for 23 hours a day. The absolute sensory deprivation was a weapon used to completely break her mind. She lost all track of days, months, and seasons. The only time the box was opened was when Cameron allowed her out to perform forced manual labor around the property, clean the house, or endure horrific ritualistic abuse. What baffled the FBI investigators later was how a woman could be kept captive in a standard suburban home for 7 years without the community ever hearing a scream. The answer lay in Cameron's background as a master craftsman. He had lined the basement walls with soundproof insulation and engineered the wooden box to be completely airtight and sound-resistant when locked from the outside. Neighbors would routinely wave to Cameron as he mowed his lawn, completely oblivious to the nightmare occurring just a few feet below the grass. As the years dragged into the early 1980s, Colleen's captivity took a bizarre and deeply sinister psychological turn. Cameron realized that physical chains were no longer necessary if he could completely enslave her mind. He introduced a terrifying piece of psychological manipulation, presenting Colleen with a typed, formal contract from a fictional, shadowy organization called The Company. Cameron told Colleen that the company was a massive underground crime syndicate that monitored her every move. He claimed that if she ever tried to run away, contact the police, or even speak to a neighbor, the company would instantly assassinate her parents and her siblings. To make the threat real, Cameron showed her detailed photographs and addresses of her family home, information he had gathered by secretly stalking them. Terrified into absolute submission and deeply brainwashed, Colleen signed the contract. The psychological chains were now stronger than any iron lock. Cameron was so confident in this mental prison that he began allowing Colleen out of the basement. He forced her to work as a nanny for his children, and even introduced her to neighbors as his live-in maid, Alyssa. On one occasion, Cameron boldly took Colleen across state lines to visit her actual parents in Oregon. Forcing her to lie to their faces, telling them she had run away to join a religious group and was perfectly happy. Bound by the terrifying fear that the company was watching from the shadows, Colleen stood in her parents' living room, hugged her mother goodbye, and willingly got back into Cameron's van to return to her prison. The psychological dam finally began to crack in 1984, but the breakdown didn't originate from Colleen. It came from inside the house. Cameron's wife, Janice Hooker, had been a complicit bystander for 7 years, helping her husband hide Colleen due to her own fear of his violent nature. But as their young daughters began to grow older, Janice became increasingly terrified that Cameron was going to target their own children next. Furthermore, Janice's religious beliefs began to weigh heavily on her conscience. She sought guidance from a local pastor, confessing the dark secret that had been rotting inside her home for nearly a decade. The pastor looked at her in absolute horror and told her that she needed to free the captive immediately and go to the authorities, or she would face eternal damnation. On August 9, 1984, while Cameron was away at work, Janice walked down into the basement. She unlocked the heavy wooden structure and pulled Colleen out. But the brainwashing was so profound that Colleen initially refused to leave, terrified that the company would murder everyone if she stepped off the property. Janice sat her down and delivered a shocking revelation. There was no company. It was a complete lie invented by Cameron to manipulate her through fear. The realization hit Colleen like a physical blow. The invisible walls of her 7-year prison crumbled instantly. Janice drove Colleen to a local bus station, handed her enough money for a ticket, and Colleen boarded a bus heading straight back to her family. After 7 years of living in a wooden box beneath a waterbed, Colleen Stan was finally free. Even though Colleen was safe, the nightmare was far from over. Janice initially begged Colleen not to go to the police, hoping they could simply move on with their lives. For several months, Colleen stayed with her family, trying to process the immense trauma of her missing youth. But the weight of justice could not be ignored. In November 1984, Janice finally went to the police and confessed everything, training her full testimony for total legal immunity. Police units immediately swarmed the Red Bluff property. Forensic investigators descended into the dark basement, pulling the horrific wooden boxes, leather restraints and soundproof paneling out into the daylight as evidence. Cameron Hooker was arrested and charged with multiple counts of kidnapping and sexual assault. The subsequent trial in 1985 became a national media sensation. The defense tried to argue that Colleen was a willing participant, pointing to the fact that she had multiple opportunities to escape, and had even visited her parents without running away. They tried to paint it as a bizarre lifestyle choice, rather than a captivity. But the prosecution countered with a groundbreaking legal strategy, bringing in top psychological experts to explain the phenomenon of extreme coercive control and brainwashing. Colleen took the witness stand herself. With incredible bravery, she detailed the sensory deprivation of the box, the terrifying psychological weight of the company contract, and how fear can completely paralyze a human being's free will. The jury was completely transfixed by her strength. On October 11, 1985, Cameron Hooker was found guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 104 years in maximum security prison, ensuring the predator would never walk the streets again. Colleen Stan's survival is considered a miracle in modern psychology. She refused to let those 7 years in darkness dictate the rest of her life. She went on to get a college degree, raise a beautiful family, and write a memoir detailing her journey. Today, she works closely with trauma support groups, helping victims of severe psychological abuse reclaim their voices. Her story remains a testament to the fact that while a predator can lock a body in a box, they can never truly extinguish the human soul's will to survive.